On the 8th of February, 2022, the peaceful and beautiful island of Cyprus, known for its eye-catching landscape and bustling tourist attractions, erupted into chaos. Its residents was left in shock as they had just witnessed the most horrific crime in the island's history. A gruesome assassination that looked like a scene out of a Hollywood movie had just taken place in broad daylight in front of tens of witnesses. Who were the perpetrators behind such a brazen assassination plot, one might ask? For masked gunmen wielding submachine guns and automatic rifles had unleashed their powerful artillery on none other than the island's most influential businessman known as Halil Falayalay. Halil Falayalay, a businessman of Turkish descent, had built himself a lucrative gambling and hotel empire by establishing his famous Les Ambassadeurs chain of hotels and casinos dotted around the island in various locations. One might ask why a professional hit squad would be hired to take out a seemingly innocent hotel and casino owner. Unbeknownst to the island's residents and international patrons who frequented Falayalay's establishments, this businessman was far from ordinary. He was a major player in the narcotics trade, with his tentacles spanning the entire globe. His shrewd business tactics and appetite for violence had made his name the stuff of nightmares in the underworld. He was on the radar of a couple of law enforcement agencies, including Interpol, Drug Enforcement Agency, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. In order to understand what led to Halil's demise, we first need to take a deep dive into his history and rise to power, which eventually made him a target. Born on the 9th of November, 1969, not a lot is known about his early childhood. He only started to make waves in his late teens and early 20s. His stocky and muscular build got him a security gig in the nightlife of Ankara, Turkey. He worked as a doorman/bouncer and had a reputation for being a no-nonsense, tough guy. This quickly earned him a spot as an enforcer in the Turkish underworld. He would be contracted by loan sharks to collect debts and diffuse gang disputes. He eventually built a relationship with another rising star in the underworld known as Sedat Peker. This friendship would lead him into the construction racket. As someone who had already been plying his trade in small-time narcotics deals, the construction deal allowed him to expand and diversify his craft, as he could now merge his drug empire with his legal business, allow him to launder his drug proceeds along with his criminal buddies' cash too. At this point, he was still flying under the radar and hadn't caught the attention of the police. In 2009, his name started to make the rounds in local Turkish law enforcement agencies when he was indicted on extortion charges after threatening another businessman due to a dispute over a local asphalt tender. Falayalay and his goons pulled up in black SUVs wielding baseball bats and pistols and threatened the fellow tender competitor into closing up shop. Falayalay was arrested for the incident but was later released by the court. Rumor has it he was already in bed with powerful political figures, which rendered him untouchable. His sizable donations towards political figures made him a very attractive ally to have by your side. However, these very same political alliances he had forged would later be the biggest contributors to his downfall, as I shall point out later on in this video. In May of 2011, Falayalay's name made it in the headlines once more. This time it was after a case was filed by the U.S. government. An arrest warrant was issued for the arrest of Halil and his brother Hosni for money laundering and the distribution of wholesale heroin. This is where we begin to understand his political alliances. Falayalay and Sedat Peker had managed to acquire a lucrative deal by dealing directly with warlords in Afghanistan. This allowed them to create their own pipeline into Europe and North America. However, it wouldn't be an easy feat to achieve moving tons of narcotics across the vast borders without any backing from higher powers. Falayalay and Sedat had now formed a coalition with former Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yildirim and his son Erkam Yildirim. The involvement of the former Turkish Prime Minister was noted when transactions totaling up to €3 million were made by Sedat to the former Prime Minister's son. These were done under the guise of political donations towards the ruling party UBP. These payments guaranteed Falayalay and Sedat's status as untouchables in the Turkish underworld. This relationship had also garnered them alliances with Moroccan government officials who helped with the moving the narcotics from the coast of North Africa into Spain. As Falayalai and Peker's drug empire thrived, Falayalai's attention was drawn to the world of casinos and gambling. Due to the strong Islamic culture in Turkey, Falayalai would set up shop only in Cyprus to run his illegal betting operations whilst maintaining ties to his Ankara affiliates back in his old stomping grounds. All his efforts to rebrand himself did not shield him from the controversy of all his underworld dealings. He had no way of escaping his dark history, and snippets of his life would be constantly put on blast as he would continue to rack up cases. In 2015 he would be in the spotlight again for allegations of assaulting an employee who worked at one of his casinos. He had accused said employee of ripping him off. Falayalai and 3 other associates proceeded to kidnap the casino employees, brutally torturing him and then forcing him to sign off on a trust deed. Upon discovery of this matter by law enforcement, an arrest warrant was issued for Falayalai, and soon enough he turned himself in alongside his 3 associates. He was put on remand for 4 days initially, but this was later extended to a 70-day period. He however managed to beat the system on medical grounds due to a severe heart condition. At this point, it seemed like no charges thrown at him could ever stick. Time and time again he would slip between the cracks. Falayalai had also established close ties to Colombian cartels, giving him access to the beloved white powder. He and Sadat were alleged to be the key figures in negotiating deals between the South Americans and Eastern European gangs. It is alleged that the two would earn massive amounts of commissions for brokering the deals, then furthermore, use the gambling dens as giant washing machines to launder money for all parties involved. It isn't hard to imagine what such power and influence can do to a man's ego. Following the expansion of Falayalai and Sadat's enterprises, they began to get too big for their boots. The former prime minister and his son were no longer valuable allies, rather it started to feel like they were just being extorted without being given any real protection in exchange. Falayalai began to plot a way to get rid of the former prime minister and his son for good. It is alleged that Falayalai lured the former prime minister and his son to one of his casinos. Upon their arrival they were showered with lavish gifts and offered all the 5-star amenities. Unbeknownst to them, this was all part of a setup to get them drunk and catch them in very compromising act. Allegedly, Falayalai had set up cameras in their rooms and had recorded of some footage of the former prime minister in some very lewd acts. This was all the ammunition he needed, and soon enough it was alleged that he and Sadat set out to blackmail the disgraced former dignitary. This apparently was the straw that finally broke the camel's back and made Falayalai a man marked for death. It was just a matter of time before something bad would surely happen. Sadat Peker had already fled to the United Arab Emirates and had already began a massive campaign as a whistleblower, exposing all the shady alliances between the ruling party and underworld figures such as himself and Falayalai. Millions of Turkish nationals would tune in on his channel, and he seemed to have the support of the public in exposing the Turkish government's dirty dealings and corruption scandals. If you would like an in-depth breakdown of Peker's rebellion against the Turkish government, help me get this video to 100 likes. Back to Falayalai and how his assassination was carried out. It is alleged that 4 men with ties to Turkish military intelligence were sent to the sunny vacation island on the 4th of February, 2022. They came in by boat to avoid the strict airport regulations that they would have possibly encountered if they had flown in. These perps were identified as Mustafa S., Abdurrahim C., Cengiz S., and lastly Ender Y. All the men mentioned had previous military training and had been found to have been wired money by a holding company registered to the former prime minister's son. This fact alone sent shock waves and created a media frenzy. This could now directly be labeled as payment for the hit. The 4 men upon arrival purchased a silver Mazda, which would be their mode of transport to carry out the hit. The 4 men proceeded to carry out a surveillance and reconnaissance mission for 3 days to study the movement of their target. Falayalai usually rolled around the island with a small army of armed mercenaries, which made him a difficult target. Speculation has it that they had an inside man in Falayalai's entourage feeding them information regarding his security detail and travel schedule. On the fateful morning of 8 February, the 4 men left their residential lodge and with the trunk of their Mazda loaded up with Kalashnikov rifles and semi-automatic handguns. The four-man drove to Chautauqua, the affluent suburb where Falailai and his family resided. The plan was in motion and they set their ambush along a clear stretch of road which was used by Falailai and his convoy on their way to the inner city where he ran his casinos. On this day something very odd took place. Falailai, who normally rolled around with a small army, seemed to have chosen to be only escorted by one bodyguard who doubled as his chauffeur. His wife and kids were in a second vehicles behind his Cadillac Escalade. Falailai rode ahead with his bodyguard Murat, the two unaware of the danger that lay ahead of them. In the blink of an eye, the silver Mazda appeared out of the brush and barricaded the Cadillac's path. Three men in ski masks jumped out and unleashed a barrage of bullets aimed at the SUV. Murat, the driver, had no time to react as he was the first one to be struck by 4 rounds to the chest. The trio of shooters made sure to circle around the car to ensure no one would survive. All this took place in front of Falailai's family and tens of innocent bystanders. A total of 64 rounds were fired, with 16 of them finding their mark on Falailai's chest, legs, neck and arms. Murat, the driver, was pronounced deceased on the spot, but miraculously Falailai was still alive. He was rushed to Near East Private Hospital but later succumbed to his wounds. This marked the end of his reign of terror, but it was just tip of the iceberg. Upon his death, paperwork connecting him to a betting scheme that netted an estimated $800 million. Like, share and subscribe for a part 2 detailing the verdict of his killers and the seizure of his assets. I will also unravel the case behind Sadat Peker and how he revealed some damning tape sent to him by his partner in crime before his demise.